Hey guys, TrepChains here. Just wanted to take you through my current Natalya-Marauders hybrid build. It's using a 6-piece Natalya's set and 4-piece Marauders set, so everything is built around that. Using Ring of Royal Grandeur in the cube. So Natalya's set really focuses on Reign of Vengeance. So Reign of Vengeance becomes the buff for this build. We don't use standard Vengeance or anything like that, just Reign of Vengeance. To give a massive buff after we cast Reign of Vengeance. So you want to be casting Reign of Vengeance when you're running this build pretty much as often as possible, but at least every 10 seconds, because the 6-piece set bonus you're using says that after casting Reign of Vengeance you're dealing 3,500% increased damage and take 60% reduced damage for 10 seconds. So at least every 10 seconds, but as long as your cooldown's up, just hit it. Importantly, the 2-piece set bonus on this reduces the cooldown of Reign of Vengeance by 4 seconds when you hit with a hatred generating attack or a hatred spending attack. So as long as you are hitting things with either your cluster arrow or your invasive fire, you'll be reducing that cooldown. So yeah, that's pretty important. Now Marauders, you have the 4-piece bonus of, which is in making your sentries. So Marauders is sentries based, so this is basically a cluster arrow / sentries based build. Are dealing 400% increased damage, and they're going to cast your hatred spender, which is cluster arrow, when you cast it. So they're, I guess, the key base things. We're working around both of these sets. So let me go over some of my gear and what I'm wearing. So starting with my helm. So the rolls you want in this is basically all about damage. So you're looking for dexterity, which is your main stat, critical hit chance, and your cluster arrow damage. So there's 2 damage types you'll see on my gear. One is cluster arrow damage and one is sentry damage. So again, we're really basing it around those 2 skills. So we want as many damage buffs on those as we can. So yeah, and moving to the shoulders, another important thing that comes into this build, which you'll see here. So I've got the dexterity and the sentry damage, which I've already mentioned, but we've also got the area damage and reduced resource cost. Now cluster arrow as a base, cluster arrow costs a lot. It costs 40 hatred, which you can see right there. I've only got 150 hatred, so we've got to have a lot of resource cost to keep using this cluster arrow that we want to use. So reduce all resource costs. Thankfully on Marauder's shoulders, reduce all resource costs always rolls. You just want it to roll as high as possible. So that's not difficult to get on your shoulders, but it's on several other pieces as well. So area damage is, this build is very different to something like Impale with Shadows. If you've played that, where you're just targeting elite, this build you want to kill everything. It's actually quite a squishy build, and stuff will kill you if you don't kill it. So area damage can come in handy for killing that trash. So they're the stats you really want on that piece: dexterity, area damage, reduce all resource cost, and sentry damage. Some pieces I have the right stats, some pieces are still a bit here nor there. Okay, chest piece. So you want your sentry damage again on your chest piece, because you can roll that, and then the other stuff is mainly about survivability. Dexterity for damage, and vitality for survivability. There are other things you could roll instead if you want, but these I would say are the preferred stats. On your gloves, you are looking for all about damage. When you get to gloves, dexterity, critical hit damage, critical hit chance, and area damage. Again, you'll see area damage through a few pieces here. Just set pieces first. So Natalya's leggings. This one is actually rolled really all about survivability. So dexterity gives you damage, but then vitality and all resistance. So whatever pants you're wearing. I guess the other thing to note, because you're wearing 3-piece Marauders and 5-piece Natalyas to give you the 6 and 4 when you include your Ring of Royal Grandeur, you actually have a couple pieces you can pick. So the shoulders have to be Marauders, because Natalya's doesn't have any shoulders. But most of the other set pieces you can choose, right? So if you have better Marauders pants and worse Natalya's pants, and then better Natalya's chest piece and worse Marauders, you can like flick those around. So they don't necessarily have to be the way I've got the pieces. You just want to pick your best 5 Natalyas. I mean, you have to have Marauder's shoulders, you have to have Natalya's crossbow and Natalya's ring, but the other pieces you can kind of pick, just making sure you end up with 5 pieces of Natalya's and 3 pieces of Marauders. Okay, so yeah, pants all about survivability. Boots, mainly about survivability, but you can get cluster arrow damage on your boots, so you really want that cluster arrow damage on your boots. So cluster arrow damage and then dexterity, vitality, resist, all a good roll. So they're the main set pieces, or your main armor set pieces. So moving to the rings, so you have to have the Natalya's ring. Now, my rings aren't rolled the best. Stuff you want on your rings does include crit hit chance and crit hit damage for more damage. As you can see, this one does not have crit hit damage. Dexterity, where you can get it. Area damage, if you can get it. Neither of my rings have area damage, but again, it's a place you can get it. And a damage roll is also useful. So I've got a couple of useful stats on here. I've got a damage roll and crit hit chance. I've also got reduced resource cost. Now, most people don't recommend having this on your ring, but this is the best ring I've got so far for this build. So at least it is somewhat useful for the build, because as I say, we want to reduce our hatred cost of the cluster arrow as much as possible. Okay, and my other ring, we're using the Endless Walk set, Compass Rose Traveler's Pledge. So on your other ring, again, you want those same kind of stats: crit hit chance, crit hit damage, dexterity, area damage, and a damage roll. They're the kind of stats that you want to work into your rings. So on this, I've got 3 of those stats. I've got a plus damage roll, crit hit chance, crit hit damage, so it's not too bad. Don't even have dexterity. This I found on a different character, so it's got intelligence on it. I get a bit of resist all, yay me. But I've obviously put my despair in there to get some dexterity, but I don't have, you know, the area damage, which would be nice if you can get it. Because I'm on Endless Walk set, let's go to Traveler's Pledge. Now, this Traveler's Pledge is not ancient because I haven't been able to roll a decent one ancient, but it does have the right stats. So your amulet is one of the places you can roll elemental damage, so you really want that. So for this build, you'll see shortly that everything is cold, or at least a version that I'm running. So you want cold skill damage there, crit hit damage, crit hit chance. So that's basically all damage. Now the legendaries, there's only 3 legendaries going along with this build. As you can see, most is set pieces. So Zoe's Secret is all about survivability. So you can see the legendary stat, you take, it goes up to 9%, so mine's kind of mid-roll. Less damage for every companion you have active. Now from the Marauders 2 set bonus, you've got all the companions to your side. So you've got about, I don't know, there's a bunch of companions anyway. So because you've got every companion, that's a bit of a survivability buff, although the build is still really squishy. Important to remember. And the stats you want in that are all about survival as well. So dexterity, vitality, resist all, and a % life roll is perfect. Rats of Clarity, again, I've included these for survivability. So your hatred generators reduce your damage taken by, I think it's 40 to 50%. So you just got to make sure you're hitting your evasive fire at least every 5 seconds, if at all possible, to get that damage reduction going. And the stats you want on these are what I've got rolled on here. Cold skills, again, your braces, you can get an elemental damage, so it's really important that you do. And then dexterity, vitality, and then crit hit chance for some more damage. So that's great. And then your quiver is Bombardier's Rucksack. Now you really want this quiver because you get 2 additional sentries. So the base sentries without this quiver, well, I think there's passive as well, but without this quiver I'd only have 3, and now I have 5. So you really need that because all your sentries are doing damage when you hit with that cluster arrow. So that's a lot more damage for you. Stats that you want on this, I'm pretty happy with mine. It's my only, obviously, primal piece in this build. So dexterity, attack speed, crit hit chance, area damage is great, sentry damage is great. I've rolled reduced resource cost in because I found when I've played this, and this build that I have right now has cleared a greater up to 106 in Season 12 so far with this exact gear. So keep that in mind. I am really struggling with hatred still. So I find that useful. There are some other things. So I've seen some other people roll in there increased damage against elites. So that's another possibility for a bit more damage. But I personally prefer the resource cost there. Now the last piece is the weapon. So this has to be a Natalya's weapon to make up your 5 pieces of Natalya's that you're wearing. Now mine isn't rolled particularly well. So obviously I've got on there, you know, your damage roll, your +% damage, your dexterity, your attack speed, they're all good things. But because mine initially rolled bad, I also have a hatred regen roll, which is typically not recommended considering how much I'm complaining about hatred. It's not the worst thing to have. But in general, what you want on there is the highest possible weapon damage roll. That's your top stat. As you can get, you do want a plus damage roll, you do want dexterity, you do want attack speed, and then the other stats that would help you on here could be increased damage against elites. You can get 8% on that. Area damage, again, could be useful up to, I think, I don't know whether it's 20 or 24% on a weapon, and reduced resource cost. Again, would be more valuable on your weapon. So there's a bunch of stats there that you can work in to your weapon, but really your weapon has to be focused on damage. That's what it's there for. Okay, so there, my base gear, and let's go to the cube because there are also legendary stats that are working into this build. Obviously, Ring of Royal Grandeur, that allows us to wear the 5-piece of Nats and the 3-piece of Marauders to get our 6/4 Nats Marauders. Manticore, extremely important. So it's reducing the hatred cost of cluster arrow by 50%. So that's taking our base 40 straight down to 20, and then all our other resource cost add on to that. So that's absolutely essential for the build to have your Manticore in your cube. You can't wear it because the weapon you're wearing is a set weapon, so you can't put a set weapon in the cube. Frostburns. So you'll see shortly that a bunch of the skills, I think at least 4 of the skills that we're using are cold skills. So Frostburns are awesome for the 20% increased damage for anything cold, which is most of our skills, and a 50% chance to freeze enemies. Now, I've already said this build is squishy. I've found it squishy anyway when I'm playing it. So when you're freezing stuff, and you're doing a lot of freezing stuff with your cold skills, that's helping those enemies not attack you and kill you. So that's great. And I've already explained Ring of Grandeur. Okay, so that's our gear. While I'm in my inventory, we'll look at the gems I'm using. So on all your jewellery, just like any build in this game, you have to have a socket on every piece of jewellery so you can wear a legendary gem. So I'm using Bane of the Trapped, which increases damage against any enemies under the effects of control impairing effects, which we have a lot of with cold. We're chilling stuff, we're freezing stuff all the time by X% based on your level. And then anything within 15 yards. You don't really want anything within 15 yards of you in this build. You want to be ranged because of your other gems and because you're squishy. But if something is, then it's definitely under control of pairing effect by the thing. But we are freezing stuff and chilling stuff, so that's going to proc our Bane of the Trap. Daystone of Vengeance. This is why we want to be, one of the reasons we want to be away from things. So damage you deal is increased by X% for every 10 yards between you and the enemy hit. Maximum of maximum X% increase at 50 yards. So if we're 50 yards away from the enemies, they're going to be taking a lot more damage, which is great. It can be a bit difficult depending on your map, but you just want to know that you want to be as far away as you can to be maximizing your use of Daystone of Vengeance. And then the other one is Enforcer. So Enforcer increases your damage of your pets by X%, and your pets take less damage. So the pets taking less damage isn't, I guess, too important for this build, because we're wearing it because the increased damage of your pets actually activates the sentries. So you get increased sentry damage by wearing this ring, even though it's not necessarily, you know, the first thing you'd think of when you think of pets. So that's why we're wearing that gem. Okay, so now finally for the skills. Okay, here's our skills. Evasive Fire, Focus. Now really you can use any 7 hatred generating skill. You just need a decent hatred generator in there. But Evasive Fire is pretty good for like hitting things pretty easily, and we're using the cold rune. Procs all of our extra cold damages for that bit extra damage, and also, you know, will help with chilling stuff if needed. yeah, so we use the focus because that gives us, I believe, more hatred, and it stops us backflipping. I don't know where it says that, but that's what it should be doing. Cluster Arrow Maelstrom. So this is our cold version of Maelstrom, but it's also important to note here that there are rockets involved, so that's going to come in when we talk about the passives. And it's our main damage dealer for this build is Cluster Arrow Maelstrom. Rain of Vengeance Flying Strike. So this goes back to your Natalya's bonuses. This is, instead of using a standard Vengeance build, which a lot of Demon Hunter builds use, we're using Rain of Vengeance basically instead. So it's there to be a buff, basically. We're using the cold one because it's going to freeze our enemies for 2 seconds, which is going to help us stay alive. But the main thing we're using for it is to buff our damage elsewhere through nats, and to reduce our damage again through the nats set bonuses. Sentries. So Sentries is now coming back to really using Marauders. And then importantly, our Sentries are going to be firing our cluster arrow when we do. Again, we're using the cold. If you're putting these around, you can see here using the cold version, it's going to chill all nearby enemies and slow them. So that's going to then, again, go back and proc our Bane of the Trap. There's a lot of damage things that are interacting in this build. So if you can manage to place them, I guess, further apart, you're going to be affecting more things. Vault, this is just for movement. I find you can't use it significantly because you run out of discipline way too quickly on this build compared to the other Demon Hunter builds I'm used to, but it will get you out of trouble, and if you watch, I guess, some of my videos, you'll find me using it, just to get out of sticky situations quickly. I don't find it's useful for moving long distances in this build, unlike something like Shadows Impale, where you basically get free vault, just because, you know, your discipline is, I mean, I've only got on this build a discipline pool of 40 and it costs 8. Tumble just allows your second one to cost a little less, but you still can run through it quite quickly, but it's important to have some movement there. Companion, Wolf Companion, this is, I mean, obviously you have to have a companion still there to go with Marauders and get all your pets, but Wolf Companion is basically a damage buff. So if you can time it to hit when you're hitting with your cluster arrows, that's awesome, but it's just important to hit it relatively regularly once it's off cooldown so that you get that damage buff. Okay, so moving to the passive skills now. Cull the Weak. So again, we're chilling lots of things, we're freezing lots of things. Cull the Weak increases our damage against slowed or chilled enemies by 20%. We're doing that a lot, so that's a nice damage boost. Ballistics increases our damage of rockets by 100%. Now, Maelstrom is rockets. I mentioned that before. So Maelstrom works beautifully with ballistics and buffs our damage again. Custom Engineering gives us more sentries again. So it's similar to the Quiver. We're getting more sentries. So we get, I think, 1 extra from here and then 2 extra from the Quiver. And it also increases their duration. So instead of the base, I think it's 30 seconds for a sentry. Yes, they're going to last us a minute once we put them down. Maximum. Once you get to your 5 in the end, once you've got Custom Engineering and your Bombardier's Rucksack Quiver, and you lay your 6th one, your 5th one disappears. But at least while they're there, they last a bit longer. And finally, Night Stalker. So, as I say, you need to be using a 7 hatred generator if you can, because hatred is so important to this build to be firing off your cluster arrows. But Night Stalker gives you even extra hatred. So now every time I'm hitting evasive fire, I'm actually generating 11 hatred, which is a lot more useful for me than 7. So that's why I recommend that in the build. Okay, so I think we've gone over our gear, we've gone over our cube, we've gone over the legendary gems, and we've gone over the skills. So I think I've covered everything. So I forgot to talk about Paragon. So in Paragon, I mean, obviously once you're Paragon 800 or above, you want everything in all of these, but if you are prioritizing them, you would prioritize crit chance and crit damage first, and then attack speed next and cooldown reduction last. You don't really need cooldown reduction for this build. For defense, again, as long as you're 800 plus in everything, if I was going to prioritize them, I would personally prioritize resist all first, followed by life, followed by armor, because you already get armor from dexterity, followed by life regeneration last. Utility, again, once you are Paragon 800, you got them all, but prioritization, I would say resource cost reduction is going to be first, followed by area damage, followed by life per hit, and then gold find. You don't need gold find for solo pushing. In core, you obviously need enough movement speed so that you're at 25% overall. So if you happen to have some on your boots, which you don't really want to be geared, ideally, you would have this down a bit. You do want your maximum hatred. Hatred is so important for this build, and I've personally put everything else into dexterity. So that's what I would recommend. While we've got some survivability stuff elsewhere, you are trying not to get hit. So we're just trying to maximize damage there. So now I've covered everything. If I haven't, let me know in the comments and I'll try and respond for what you need to know. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and yeah, feel free to watch some of my higher greater riffs with it just to see how I play. Keep in mind it's really squishy, so you want to keep your distance, and that's going to maximize Zay's Stone of Vengeance. It is very hatred heavy, so you do need to be using your generator. When I was rewatching my videos, I'm like, I need to be using my generator more. And spread out those centers where you can too, and you just have to try and really clear everything. Okay, good luck and GG.